Okay, so we said that the CMA is the overall regulator. But there are some sectors which, for a variety of reasons, need continual regulation. So, as we said, the CMA tends to investigate when when a case is referred to it, or where after a number of years it decides that something isn't working. There are some sectors that, for a variety of reasons, need regulating on a kind of 24/7 basis. And there are two main reasons, and those sectors then get an industry, they get what's called an industry-specific regulator. And there are two main reasons that might be. One is that it's just very difficult to introduce competition. Now, you might say that such sectors might be best run by the government, but there are some that are very difficult. These tend to be particularly things like natural monopolies. So there's not much point in, depending on how you can do it, but it's the whole point about natural monopolies is that they're going to be most efficient if there's one firm in them at one level. So an example of that is Ofwat. The Office of Water, which is the water regulator, they've been in the news quite a lot with questions over how good a job they're doing. But we've said before that it doesn't make much sense to have one set of water, so two sets of water pipes under each street. But even outside of that, there isn't a national water network. So the water in certain areas can't go to other areas. It's not like Thames Water can go and compete with Yorkshire Water because there isn't there's no way of getting the water there. There isn't a pipe network that extends across the whole country. So therefore, because essentially in water each company has a regional monopoly, as a consumer you have no choice, it probably makes sense to regulate it. A second set, though, are industries that are sensitive. It may be they have competition, but it might not work very well, or they're very complex. So if you look at, for example, gas and electricity, they have their own regulator. It's called Ofgem, the Office of Gas and Electricity Marketing. Because obviously, this is an essential product. The price of gas and electricity affects us all every day. And as you'll know, over the last few years, the regulator has stepped in to set price caps on gas and electricity. Or industries that, again, are very complex or have far-reaching effects. So if you take banking, obviously, we all know what happened, kind of back in the financial crisis. Banking, because again, it's very complex and it has very wide-reaching effects. It has its own regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA. So, what do these? What are these watchdogs there for? What is their role? What we said is that the goal of regulators really would be, in an ideal world, to create competition. In these sectors, competition is very difficult, or in the case of banking, is kind of there are other things that you'd worry about, the nature of competition. But what the watchdogs are trying to do is to simulate competition. In other words, they say, what would happen in this market, do we think, if there was competition? It's likely that, for example, prices would come down, firms would invest, they'd have to become more efficient and so on. There isn't competition, so what they do is they say, what we're going to do is we're going to regulate outcomes. In other words, we're going to regulate what should have happened. We're going to make firms behave as if there was competition. So things that we regulate include things like prices. For many years in industries like water, gas, and electricity, there was a model called RPI minus X. This is gradually being phased out. But the idea behind this is saying, well, it's obviously reasonable to allow you to increase your prices by inflation. This is an old model, so it uses an old measure of inflation. So you can increase your prices by inflation. But obviously, I need to give you an incentive to be efficient. And the X is a measure of inefficiency. So imagine that you were a totally efficient lean mean fighting machine. If you're totally efficient, then X would be 0. What we're saying is you can increase price by inflation, because we can see there is no way in which you can make any further cost savings. But suppose I thought you were inefficient. Suppose I thought that there was like 10% organisational slack or something. Then I'd say, well, I'm going to set X at 10%. So if inflation is 3%, you're actually going to have to cut your prices by 7%. The inflation of 3% minus the 10% estimate for inefficiency. And how are you then going to survive as a business? You have to get rid of that inefficiency. You can still make a profit even if your price has been cut if you get rid of that inefficiency. So it's an attempt to be fair to businesses by saying, well, look, I understand that your costs are rising, but at the same time trying to create the incentive, the drive for efficiency that would have happened had competition been there. And the model's been criticised because it's failed to provide for investment. There have been refinements to this model where there's kind of RPI minus X plus K, where K is an allowance for much needed investment and so on. But the world's moving towards more sophisticated price setting regulations these days. But the point is that we want to set a price, but it's difficult. We've got to be fair to consumers, but we've got to be fair to the businesses. Other things that we can regulate is we can regulate quality. We would expect in a competitive market, we'd expect firms to compete on the basis of quality. Therefore, in the absence of competition, we'll simply make sure that quality will try and regulate the level of quality. So we take Ofwat again. In principle, they're trying to regulate the quality of drinking water, trying to make sure that the water that comes out of your taps is fit to drink. River water, trying to make sure that it's both good for the environment, good for wildlife, and notionally safe to swim in, which it isn't. Don't do it. And regulate what happens with sewage. That's an important part of the water industry. All the water industry firms have been in the news recently for kind of literally pumping shit into rivers. In theory, the regulator regulates this and tries to stop them from doing this. And again, it's not clear. They've been doing a great job. And the other thing that we would expect to happen if there was competition is you would expect there to be investment into so dynamic efficiency, investment into new capital and innovations. So again, if we take the water industry, in theory, there are requirements for water companies to invest into new pipes. A lot of the UK's water leaks out through broken pipes. The regulator tries to make sure these pipes are replaced. Or sewage processing equipment, again, to try to avoid the problems. A lot of the time, or some of the time, when sewage gets into rivers is because heavy rainfall overwhelms the company's sewage processing facilities. Therefore, what the regulator wants to do is to make those firms invest in it. So you've got this two-part structure. The CMA, which is a general regulator for things like pens that don't need a particular regulator. The CMA pays very little attention to the pen market unless there seems to be a problem that's emerging within that market. Then we have regulators, these watchdog bodies, these industry-specific regulators that are there all the time. They're continually monitoring, setting targets, controlling prices, trying to ensure that quality is produced to simulate competition, because it's not possible to introduce competition in an easy and meaningful way.